Okay, let's move to the COVID-19 Laboratory Testing Forum. And we are very pleased to have Professor Chengbing Wang as our forum chair, as well as three distinguished forum speakers, Dr. Frank Yang, Dr. Jason Chan, and Dr. Yushen Jiang. And my name is Ruben Luo. I am the board secretary of NACA and the clinical chemistry fellow of UC San Francisco. The Professor Chengbing Wang, as our forum chair today, is going to give us an overview of the laboratory testing contents of the newly published Chinese guidelines, treatment guidelines for COVID-19. And Dr. Wang is the director of clinical laboratory of PLA General Hospital and the chairman of Chinese Society of Laboratory Medicine. And he has contributed a lot into the laboratory medicine field as a distinguished leader of Chinese medical community, especially in laboratory medicine. So we are very honored to have Professor Chengbing Wang today to give us the newest information and message of the new guidelines in terms of the laboratory testing. Professor Wang, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's my honor to be here to introduce something about the seventh edition of just Chinese government recently just published the seventh edition of the guideline for diagnosis and treatment for lower coronavirus pneumonia. Yeah, for this slide, I don't want to read word by word. I just want to give a general expression. For the routine test, I think the main significance is to differentiate from the bacterial infection. But I think it's a lot easy to differentiate from the flu virus because the disease are so complex. For the next slides. Yeah, please go. Yeah. No. Yeah. Okay. For the nucleic acid test, I think where the specimens collected from is very important. The specimens collected from lower respiratory tract, such as airvenal lavage fluid, and sputum to get the positive rate. Now I think it's higher. For the virus nucleic acid test, high positive rate and order is airvenal lavage fluid is higher than the sputum and higher than pharyngeal swabs. Swabs get in from nose. And it's higher than oropharyngeal swabs. And swabs is from get into mouth. Yeah. But airvenal lavage fluid and sputum specimens collected from from lower respiratory tract are difficult because they are in vessel. So have to cut from here and then get the tubal into to the lung or to get the fluid and sample out. So I think most people don't want to do it. For lower chlorus pneumonia confirms in the guideline total is 3, and the first is the positive result in the detection of the lower coronavirus nucleic acid. Second is the sequence of the virus higher homologous to lower coronavirus. I think it's about the two, as I don't want to say something. Just the third, specific IgM and IgG antibody test positive in the serum. I just want to give a little explain. Firstly, is IgM and IgG, antibodies test positive results must be later than the nucleic acid test. I think it's very important. So if we want to give a diagnosis earlier for the virus, maybe it's have some problem. Second is IgM and IgG antibodies test, may present false positive or false negative results. Yeah. The third is that if IgM and IgG antibody test just the one time, I think it's difficult to make a confirm of diagnosis. But continuous monitoring, the antibody results may be more helpful to a clinical doctor to determine something. Yeah. Because the antibody where you get several times to test, the results may be higher than the higher MMAs. I think it's very significant. Okay, I just want to say this.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Wang. And I think it's very clear that besides the inflammatory analytes, that the confirmatory test on nucleic acid, and especially the antibody serological test that you mentioned and you emphasized, is very helpful. I think this information can help a lot for the people for the labs who are going to start the COVID-19 test in the United States. Okay, now let's move to the panel discussion session. We are very pleased to have invited distinguished speakers, Dr. Frank Young from Adicom, Dr. Jason Chen from KingMed, Dr. Yushen Jiang from DN. They all have pretty much experience in fighting the COVID-19 in the front line in terms of doing the clinical laboratory testing. So we would like to have our three distinguished speakers to talk about, just to discuss, around these questions and provide us their opinions. So let's move to the first question. The question is, how are samples collected and processed to be tested in reference laboratories? We would like to ask Dr. Frank Young from Adicom to give us his input on question number one. Dr. Yang, please.
Thank you, Dr. Luo, and thank you, Professor Wang. First, I would like to thank NACA for organizing this forum. I'm Dr. Yang of Adicom Medical Laboratories. I'm honored to be invited to this forum, along with my fellow speakers, Dr. Chen of KingMed and Dr. Jiang of DN. Like LabCorp and Quest in the United States, KingMed, DN, and Adicom are top 3 independent clinical laboratories in China. About 2 months ago, on January 31st of this year, Adicom, along with the biggest competitors of KingMed and DN, had formed a national frontline coalition against the COVID-19. We are here not as competitors, but as comrades. Answering this question, I have to say our experience only applies to independent clinical laboratories that may be different from CDC laboratory and public hospitals. That's probably why we have this session. From last December to late January, samples were handled almost exclusively by CDC. During this time, samples were collected by hospital staff and processed by CDC laboratories or public hospitals. By January 27, independent clinical laboratories were called in. Samples start to be distributed to BGI, Huada Jiyin, KingMed, Jinyu, DN, and Adicom. This was the first time independent clinical laboratories were called in to help large public health crisis. The reagents and protective supplies were provided by CDC. Tests Tests were conducted strictly following the manufacturer's instructions. Test results were reported to CDC in batches without issuing laboratories' own test report. That is a very unique experience for US-trained pathologists. Also in China, there is a mandatory viral inactivation step before testing can start. All samples have to go through the process at 56 degrees C for 30 minutes using either a water bath or head cloth. This step may or may not affect test results. The participation of non-public laboratories quickly bumped up the capacity of virus testing to tens of thousands per day. ADCON currently runs about 20,000 samples per day. The fast expansion of the test capacity and the extension of the test base from patients to close contact were critical to stop COVID-19 spread. That's my answer.
Hey, thank you very much, Dr. Yang. I think that's very good, comprehensive and very concise answer. I think it's really valuable, especially as the U.S. labs are just step into the testing of this pandemic virus. I think this is a very useful experience to share. Okay, so the second question is about the best practices in collecting respiratory specimens and the effective protection for the sampling staff. I would like to pass this question to Dr. Jason Chen from KingMed Diagnostics. Dr. Jason Chen is a very experienced virologist, and he has a lot of experience on handling the samples. So Dr. Chen, please.
Thank you for the introduction. We have collected samples from swabs, with swabs, usually throat swabs or nasal swabs, and also deep sputum and BAF, bronchial lavage fluid. BAF usually collected by physician, and we usually collect swab samples. So for the swab samples, we use, there are some standard procedure which can be seen from the video available online. And what we emphasize to collect the importance of the collected specimen is to keep the swab above the tissue for about 10 seconds and turn around a couple of times before you take out, so that you can get more cells, because virus is inside cells. That's important. And for the swab itself, we use synthetic fiber swabs with little brush at tip. And for the personal protection, we use gloves, masks, which is N95, long sleeve water resistant gown, and the goggles, and also face shield.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. These are very useful tips and techniques. Yeah, this are very, it can benefit the colleagues in the United States who want to start the handling the samples for the testing of COVID-19 samples. Now let's move to question number 3. What are the effective protection for laboratory professionals when handling blood, urine, stool, and respiratory specimens? So this is actually a very, actually a key question, for the U.S. colleagues who are just beginning to do the testing of all types of specimens. I think Dr. Frank Yang from ADCON also has a lot of experience, and let's get his input on this question. Dr. Yang, please.
Hi. A level 2 laboratory or P2 laboratory is adequate to handle COVID-19, according to authorities as well as experts. But we raise the personal protection to level 3. This includes an N95 face mask, goggles, Our face shields, double gloves, hat, disposable protective clothes, and shoe covers. The tests were conducted in certified PCR labs that is designed to minimize nucleic acid contamination. The concern of sample-related aerosol can be effectively protected by making sure the ventilation system is functional, following strictly the laboratory protocols and taking level 3 personal protection measures. This is true to all respiratory samples, as well as blood, urine, and stool. Since February 1st, Adicon has processed close to 500,000 COVID-19 nucleic acid tests. Many employees have participated in sample collection, sample transportation, and sample process. So far, none of our employees has been infected. That's my answer.
Thank you, Dr. Yang. I think that's very effective to that protect all your technicians and employees just from none of them get the infection. That's a pretty much a big achievement. Yeah, we would like to direct the same question number 3 to Dr. Jiang. And Dr. Yushen Jiang has experience managing the reference laboratory and managing the professionals. So Dr. Jiang, could you give us some input on question number 3?
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Jiang from Dian Diagnosis, which is the largest independent clinical lab in China, just like LabCorp or Quest in America. I'm now working on the virus detection of the clinical trial of remdesivir. As most of the samples we are handling now are positive samples, I think maybe we have something useful to share with you. Firstly, I have to remind you that this virus is a very, very terrible virus. It's not just like a big flu. So you should pay attention to every details during your work. I still think that your awareness of protection is always the best protection of yourself. And as you know that before you enter the lab, you should wear the protection clothing and the boots to protect your body and to protect your face. A face mask with positive air pressure is the best choice. But if you do not have such kind of mask, I advise you should wear N95 breathing mask to protect your respiratory and a protection goggle or face screen to protect your eyes. And you have to wear double gloves to protect your hands. All of those things that you can learn from guidelines. And here I want to share something that some details that you may not learn from guidelines. During your work, the air you breathe out and the sweat of your face will make your glasses and mask fogging up. It's not convenient and will be very dangerous if you could not see clearly. So I advise you to prepare some anti-fog things like anti-fog gel to protect your glasses or mask from fogging up. And during your operation, my appearance is that your gloves are very easy to fall off from your wrists. So we usually use some plastic tips to stick the gloves to the sleeves of the clothing, of the protection clothing, to prevent our gloves from fall up. All the samples here we are operating were inactivated by 56 degrees centigrade for 30 minutes before operation. That will make the virus inactivated, so it must be more safe. And all the samples should be prepared in a biological safety cabinet. The biological safety cabinet is the most important equipment here. We all use a B2 level cabinet here. I suggest you to check the wind direction of the cabinet before and during using it. Here we use a little piece of paper stick to the edge of the glass to observe the wind direction. So maybe it's a good method for you too. Among all the sample types, the sputum sample is most dangerous because it has the highest positive rate, the highest virus load, and requires much more complete processing steps. we tried different kinds of pre-treatment. Since although the sodium hydrox and is much more, it's a little better than proteinase K. The viral load tested by a pre-treat with sodium hydrox is a little better, but as the operation of proteinase K is much more simple, and here we choose to use proteinase K to pre-treat the sputum samples. Here we use 55 degrees centigrade for 30 minutes with proteinase K to liquefy the sputum samples. So that's the things that I can share about this question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jiang. I think your input is very valuable and useful. These tips and techniques for the colleagues working in the United States, I think they definitely need to know these and pay attention to the different sample types. Just one quick follow-up question. I heard like in the medical community in the United States, some people thought that serum samples could be safe because there seems like there's some preliminary studies showing a very kind of like undetectable viral load in serum or plasma samples. Could you comment on that? Is that really safe?
I don't think that about that so because I think that every kind of samples are very dangerous. Although maybe you cannot detect out the virus RNA because of the like sample types or other kind of things, but it doesn't mean that the virus is not exist. So I advise you to treat every kind of sample at the same degree of careful.
I see that. Yeah, thank you for the great answer. And now let's move to question number 4. As we know, next generation sequencing technology can provide you more comprehensive information about the gene sequence of the virus. So could you comment on the role of the next generation sequencing and how applicable this technology is for the diagnosis of COVID-19?
Okay, next generation sequencing is a very important research tool for the molecular diagnosis. I think it's very useful in the virus investigation works like virus population analysis, tracing, and mutation detections. As you know that the virus always occurs mutation during the spread of the virus. The clinical and the infection characters may be changed because of some important mutations. And at this time, maybe we need to use NGS to investigate the variation of the virus. But I don't think NGS can play an important role in daily detection of virus because as all you know that the operation steps are too complicated and takes too long time and it has a high cost. Just like I reminded you at the beginning, the virus is a very, very dangerous virus. It spreads very fast. I believe just in maybe several days or at most maybe several weeks, every lab will have to face a very large number of tests every day. Clinicians and CDCs need to know the test results in hours. And you know that in general, NGS cannot tell us whether the patient is infected or not just in such a short time. So, and also the cost of NGS are much more expensive. So it's not suitable for daily detection of the infection or not. So it's much more like that it will have a good value in research and investigation, but not in daily use. Our experience is that the infection diagnosis of most patients here rely on real-time PCR. And as RT-PCR is much easier to operate and the result can be given out in several hours and much more cheap. So the sensitivity and specificity are very high too. So most of the patients were diagnosed by the RT-PCR method, and it's much more suitable for daily detection of large numbers of samples. That's all. Thank you.
I see, Dr. Jiang. So just very quickly, so you don't, I think it means you didn't see a higher clinical specificity or clinical sensitivity using next generation sequencing compared to PCR.
No. The sensitivity and the specificity is good for NGS, but the time is too long and the cost is not suitable for daily detection. And I think that RT-PCR is much suitable for daily detection for large numbers of samples.
I see. So next-gen sequencing is not like superior in terms of the clinical utility compared to
yeah. It's much more like a research tool or like investigation tool, but not a daily used diagnostic tool.
Okay, I see that. Thank you so much for answering this question. I think it's very valuable input.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so for this next-gen sequencing question, I would like also get the opinion from Dr. Jason Chen from KingMed Diagnostics. Dr. Chen, could you comment on the usefulness of next-gen sequencing in the diagnosis?
Okay, the next generation sequencing is a powerful method to sequencing all the DNA nucleic acid inside the sample. Although it's take a little bit longer time and cost much more than real-time PCR. And more importantly, it has less sensitivity than the real-time PCR. So in practice, I think when we know the sequence of the genome and we have the specific target, which is new coronavirus, I don't think we need to use NGS routinely for detection. Real-time PCR is quicker and more specific, and so it's and cost much less. So it's a best way to choose.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. I think this input is very useful. It's practical, and it's also consistent with the answer from Dr. Jiang. The fifth question, let's move into this question. This is actually recently raised pretty much attention in the medical community in the United States. That's about the other tests. So the nucleic acid test, we all know it's very important. It's the kind of like the decisive diagnosis method. But also antibody tests, people now realize the IgG, IgM test can be complementary. Let's invite Dr. Frank Young. Could you give us just your input on question number 5?
Thank you. COVID-19 is relatively new. Its epidemiology study is far from over. Based on limited studies, nucleic acid test had a positive rate of 60 to 70% in acute phase, and gradually decreased to 40 to 50% during the course. The low detection rate, or the so-called high false negative rate of a nucleic acid test, is not due to the test itself, but most likely due to sampling. This is partly due to our inability to sample entire respiratory tract. Viral load in pharynx and upper respiratory tract is relatively low compared to lungs. Viral load may be too low to be detected in the sampling area at certain disease stages. This may explain why some patients developed COVID-19 pneumonia while SWABs were tested negative. On another hand, antibody test that has been recently available to us has a low detection rate in acute phase, about 30 to 40%, especially IgG, but increased to 70% at 8 to 9 days and 100% after 12 days, according to one study. Therefore, nucleic acid tests and serological antibody tests are complementary to each other. Current antibody IVDs are mostly POCT using colloid gold. Due to rush for approval under the special circumstances, many IVDs have not been properly vetted, that they need to be carefully validated in lab to find out its true sensitivity and specificity. Our specificity study conducted in IDCON for CFDA-approved IVD showed 100% specificity in about 2,000 corporate employees who participate IDCON organized return to work screening. Our parallel study of 4 antibody IVDs, 2 of them were CFDA approved, showed across the board a high specificity as well, but have varying intensities against nucleic acid positive samples, that indicating some IVDs may be more sensitive than others. The specificity and the sensitivity reported in recent literature were 90 to 99% for specificity and 89 to 95% for sensitivity, respectively. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Yang. Just a very quick follow-up question. Do you think, because people also started talking about antigen tests, so do you think that it's possible to detect the antigen and in the serum samples?
That is very possible because antigen tests have been developed recently, but unfortunately, none of them have been passed the CFDA approved. From the preliminary results, the antigen test using SARS-related antigen or newly manufactured antigen in the lab showed very high concordance with the nucleic acid test, but those results has not been published.
I see that. Thank you very much, Dr. Yang. Okay, so for this question about the utility of nucleic acid tests and antibody tests, I would like also ask Dr. Chan, Dr. Jason Chan from KingMed Diagnostics. As we know, like KingMed is one, together with Adicon and DN, one of the largest clinical laboratories in China. So you must have a large throughput and capacity in the testing of the COVID-19 samples. So could you comment on how you integrate nucleic acid tests and antibody tests and how you just position these different tests? Dr. Chan, please.
Okay, as a KingMed, we have started the test since Chinese New Year, January 25th. So far, we have been doing 1.6 million tests already, and now about 20,000 tests per day. We initially used nucleic acid test as everybody, which is required by the CDC in China. So this actually more than 90% sample has been tested by this way. And recently we have used immunological assay as well to test the patient antibody to the new coronavirus, both IgM and IgG. We have compared 3 different kits in Chinese market. One of them to detect IgM and IgG specific antibodies by chemiluminescence. And another 2 method is detect the total immunoglobulin against the coronavirus antigen. They use different method. One is by chemiluminescence. The other one is by colloid gold. And the specificity of this method is very good. It's 97 or to 100%. The sensitivity is around 80 to 90%. So we have been using this, but we don't have lots of experience on them because it's just started about 1 week ago. When we do the validation in Wuhan, they all seems perform pretty good as they indicated or they claimed in the instruction. I think this immunology test is a good complement to the nucleic acid testing, because the antibody testing is more use the serum, which is more standardized sample compared to the SWABs.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. I have a follow-up question. You mentioned that you have used the chemiluminescence assay, which can be like either quantitative or qualitative, and you also mentioned the colloidal gold test, which is like more like the lateral flow point of care testing, just yes or no. So, do you see particular usefulness of measuring the quantitative results using chemiluminescence assay?
Yes, I prefer the quantitative assay. However, so right now, this chemiluminescence method from 2 different companies that we have used, they're all for qualitative only, not for quantitation. I think it should, but technically, it should not be difficult to quantify them with chemiluminescence. But I don't know why they use so far for the quantitation only. Probably, maybe that's easier to be approved by CFDA. I'm not sure.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you, Dr. Chen, for the answer to the question. And so this, we have discussed all the 5 questions with our foreign speakers. So just let me express my the appreciation from myself and NACA to all the speakers, our forum chair, Professor Wang, our foreign speakers, Dr. Yang, Dr. Chen, and Dr. Jiang. Thank you very much for coming to the webinar to help us to deliver the message and your experience and useful information to the clinical labs scientists in the United States who are going to start testing the COVID-19 samples. Okay, thank you all for coming to the webinar, and thank you again to our speakers.
Thank you, doctors, for your informative presentation. As a reminder, our speakers will follow up with any questions you have submitted via email following this webinar. We would also like to thank LabRoots for underwriting today's educational webcast. This webcast can be viewed on demand through the end of this year, 2020. LabRoots will alert you via email when it's available for replay. We encourage you to share that email with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. Until next time, goodbye.